Welcome back to Failing Forward. Hi, I'm Bethany, founder of Oceanview Marketing. Today's guest is Paige Burns, founder of Main Page Media and a force in the world of video storytelling. In this episode, Paige shares what it's really like to walk away from a steady job and start her own production company from scratch. We talk about the pressure to be perfect, the messy early days building a business, and how she overcame imposter syndrome. And it's not by mastering every single little thing like we all often think we have to do, but instead by leaning into her strengths and taking bold action. So if you've ever struggled with overthinking your next move or putting too much pressure on one opportunity, Paige's story will hit home. All right, let's dive in. Hello and welcome to Failing Forward. Today I have Paige Burns, owner of Main Page Media. Welcome, Paige.
Thank you so much for having me.
I'm so excited to have you and learn more about your story of starting up your business. All right, so let's get right into it. So your business has been open for 5 years. Did I see you're coming up on your 5-year anniversary?
Yep, it'll be 5 years in April. So depending on when this podcast comes out, April is 5 years.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
So when you were first starting your business 5 years ago, what was the first thing that you had to tackle to get it going?
What a big question. Because it's everything, right? And I think that was one of the big things I had to tackle was the fact that starting was everything. Like you're starting from nothing. It's not like you're picking up and you already have something built. And I think that I really had to tackle that overwhelm of where do I even begin? I felt like I sat at my desk day after day and felt like I had to do everything under the sun. I had to build the perfect website. I had to have my business listed everywhere. I had to make sure all of my marketing was exactly the way I wanted it to be, which was something that I quickly realized was that wasn't the first thing I had to tackle. Really, the first thing I had to tackle was sales and getting clients. Not everything had to be perfect before I actually started doing the thing, which was something that was super important that I was told from one of my coaches early on. It was always I'd get stuck in I have to do this and I have to do that and I have to do this and I have to do that. And he was like, Paige, go out and make some money. You have to make money.
Yeah. Small part of business, right?
Right. You need to pay your rent, stay alive. So that was a good come to reality moment that I always look back on.
Had you previously been a little bit of a perfectionist?
I think that I've always been what, parents and teachers of our generation would call an overachiever, right? I know that word is not so much used anymore, but I was always a very high achieving, student, high achieving in my jobs. And so I didn't want to go in, with less than, anything less than. And I, of course, felt all of the imposter syndrome in the world when I started my business. And so I already felt so less than that I really wanted to kind of go all in. So I don't know if perfectionist is really a word that I was using a lot at the time, but it is something when I look back at my actions, I do find showing up for sure.
Mm-hmm. So you mentioned that you had a mentor that maybe helped you get over that hump of focusing on more of the money as opposed to all the details. Was there anything else besides the mentor that helped you get over that and move your business forward at the beginning?
Yeah, I mean, so that experience was, honestly, I'm so grateful for. When I started the business, there was actually this course and coaching program, which is where this coach that I mentioned came from. And it was launching there. They had revamped the whole program and it literally launched the month I started my business. And I was like, excellent, I'm jumping in on this. So that had launched, right when I started my business. And I was so grateful for that because I got in there and there was a cohort of 45 people who were starting video production companies just like me, which was so valuable. And we had, all these course materials and coaching calls and really being in community with other people who were trying to do what I was trying to do was the most important thing for me. I feel like it really started me off on the right foot. It's funny, coming on this podcast, thinking about my early failures, I feel like, of course I had them, but I feel like I skipped so many of them because I jumped in on this opportunity at the right time. Because there were so many people there who had had their businesses for years and the mistakes they were making, I was learning right away. not to make, or to it's like push that idea aside and try to move forward. And I think seeing where I was at versus where someone who'd been doing this for, 3-4 years was at, that it wasn't that different, was actually really helpful in the killing that imposter syndrome, right? And putting that down, like you're saying, like what helped me get through that, being around other people and seeing that people who I look at their work and it's amazing, and seeing that they also have doubts and they also aren't sure all the time, and realizing that that's just normal, and really normalizing that, I think, was just a huge thing for me. Like, okay, just because I'm not the most technical person in the world, right? Like I always say, like, I'm not like a gear person. Like, yes, I have nice equipment, and it makes great videos, but there are people who know everything about every camera, every lens, everything. They are like tech focused. That's not my strength. And I think that really scared me at first. And then, I was able to have conversations with people who were like, hey, Paige, like, can you use what you have? Can you do a really great job with it? Can you tell a great story? Can you work with people? All of these things were yes, 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 yes. I don't need to know how to use every single piece of equipment. And so, yeah, I mean, all the advice I feel like that I got, that I just like absorbed everything so early on, definitely helped. Of course, every single day, though, there's still, I mean, maybe not every single day, but all the time, there's still that voice, right? That's like, am I really qualified to do anything ever? It's almost like you're like, am I even an adult?
I know, my husband and I talk about that all the time. We have 2 kids and we have that thought all the time. Am I really an adult right now?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I feel that way all the time, even with like, I mean, I don't have children, but I see it with my friends with kids. That happened just the other day where my friend was said to her kid, she's like, can you imagine? Paige and I used to be kids together. And her mom was in the room and she goes, you guys are still kids. And it's like, it never goes away. That feeling of, who you once were is still who you are. Yeah.
Right. No, that's so interesting. And I think in business over the years, even in my own personal career, I always used to think everybody had their SHIT figured out. And I've come to learn that exactly what you said, no matter how successful, no matter how far in people's careers they are, there is always some form of self-doubt in the back of their head, or something they're uncomfortable with. And so I love what you said about having that community and normalizing some failures and normalizing that everybody feels like that, which ironically is part of the point of why I'm doing this podcast, is I wanted people to feel comfortable knowing everybody has failures, and successful people like yourself have failures and have gone through things to get to where they are, and they can do it, and so can the people listening. So I guess, to go back to that, was there a specific, I know you were lucky in that you got to skip over a lot of failures because of the course. Was there anything early on that sticks out in your mind that you struggled with, or that you would call a failure, and how did you get through that?
Yeah, I mean, I think one big thing at the beginning is, of course, when you're starting, I think for so many people, no matter what industry you're in, the greatest concern is what I said before, is sales, right? You're like, how do I even get a client? And I think I was reflecting on this, knowing that I was coming on this podcast, thinking about like, what were some of the things that really tripped me up? And a lot of the times I would just put a lot of weight on one lead. I'd be like, they said they want to do it. I sent them a proposal. I'm waiting on it. And then like anxiety coming in of, what do I do? What do I do next? How do I do this? What if it doesn't work? What if it does work? And like putting so much energy into that one potential lead and approaching it with scarcity. Like, this is the only lead that I have. So it's the only lead that I can get. So this is the only job that is there for me. And if I do it, I've done something amazing, right? Like, if I get it, I've made the sale, I did the thing. And really like kind of letting go of that, I think was tough for me. And something that I did have to be coached out of. But it was tough for me to just let go of that, of like obsessing over these 1 or 2 conversations I had or proposals that I was waiting on, and realizing like whether or not that works out, it's fine. And I'm very much 5 years later in a place where like I send out a proposal and like I might be like, this sounds like a really cool project. It could be great, but also like if it doesn't pan out, that's fine too. And I can very much like live in this space of I'm totally comfortable if it works or it doesn't work. Like if it works out, it's a cool project. If it doesn't work out, that just means time for other projects to come in. and feeling very at peace with that. But I think letting leads and potential clients have that power over you, I think is really holds, and I watch it happen to people. It holds a lot of people back, especially in the beginning. And I always hope for people that it's not happening, too far after the beginning of when you hear someone and they're just talking on and on about this one potential thing that might come to fruition. And it's like, can you just let that be? Because you have no control over it at this point in time.
Right.
You have done all you can. And also, don't overdo it. Don't put all your energy into this one thing when you could be spreading your energy in other places. So that was definitely a big one very early on for me.
That's great. That's great that you kind of were able to get through that. I think sales is definitely tough for a lot of people in business when starting up their business, especially if they previously didn't have any experience in it. So that brings me to a question of, even before you started your business, had you ever thought that you were going to start your own business and be an entrepreneur?
I had thought about it. I always thought it would be cool to have some kind of business. I always thought it would be cool to build something. I have this list of 100 things to do before I die that I made when I was 20. And I did it with a friend. I was working as a hostess in a restaurant and we had a lot of time to kill. And so we both were making these lists of things. But even if I still have that piece of paper all these years later. And if I look back on it, it does say start a business. And it was just, in my mind, it was going to be an Etsy shop or something. It wasn't going to be my full-time thing. And I had toyed with the idea of having my own production company. As I started my career, I was like, I could start my own production company someday. That could be kind of cool. But it wasn't I'm going to start my own production company someday, where some people really know, that's their North Star and that's kind of their end game. And I didn't have that feeling. But I did know that it was something I was interested in. And so when it came time when I actually, did it, I was in a job where I'd fully plateaued. There was really no more space for me to learn. I was the only person doing video. I was working at Simmons University. And so the university video job, oftentimes, if it's a smaller university, you're the only one there. You're the only one doing it. No one knows anything about the technical aspects or production. They know about marketing. I was of the marketing department. But beyond that, in terms of becoming a better producer, a better videographer, a better editor, none of that was really, I felt like I plateaued. I was telling the same stories all the time. I was using the same equipment all the time. Not that equipment is super important, but I was feeling very just stagnant. And I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do next. I was applying for jobs. I was interviewing for jobs, and I wasn't really sure what felt good to me. I didn't know what I wanted next. I just knew I wanted to do more. I wanted to learn more, and I wanted to grow because I've always been a person that I can't just be stagnant. I will just be so bored. And I was in, and I know this isn't the question you asked, but it's the answer I'm giving you, is why I decided to start.
No, that's great. We love the story behind it, of course.
I was in an interview for a company, a big brand, and it was a senior multimedia producer position. I would have a junior videographer underneath me, so I was like, oh, that's good. I'll there'll at least be some kind of a team. And I'm interviewing for the job, and I'm asking questions about what the role entails. And despite the fact that this was a much bigger company and a much bigger brand, the job was basically the same as what I was doing before. And I was like, I'm getting the feeling that if I want to be in-house with a brand, it's going to be the same job as it was before. And on the flip side of that, without having agency experience, I knew that if I got an agency job, the pay was not going to be what I wanted it to be. At least, maybe that's not definitive, but that's how I was feeling with the jobs I was seeing at the time. And the hours were going to be long, and I was probably going to have to take either a lateral move or a step down from what I was doing just to get that agency experience under my belt. And those roles were really competitive. And so I'm sitting in this interview, and I said, what did the person who had this job before leave to do? And they said, oh, he left to freelance and have his own production company. And I was like, well, if I'm sitting here feeling like after 6 months at this job, I would learn everything that I could learn at this job, which is really how I felt based on what they were telling me. There was a few things that they would do that I wasn't doing at my former job, but I was like, I could probably learn them pretty fast, master them pretty fast. Maybe I am ready to actually do this. And I've been toying with the idea. I thought about maybe getting a part-time job and maybe freelancing for other people. That was something I'd been thinking about. So I was kind of there, and that was definitely the moment where I was like, maybe I just do this. I had conversations with, and sorry, I'll wrap this up, but I had
That's great.
conversations with two different producers that I'd reached out to. One, I met this woman at a conference who said, "Oh, you do video. Do you know this company?" And I was like, "No, I'm not familiar with them." "Oh, they did our video. They were really great." So I reached out to them and I was like, "Hey, I met so-and-so at a conference. She said you were great. Would you ever be down to get coffee?" Got coffee with that producer who had his company with his wife for, I think, like 13 years at the time. Had a chat with him. He's like, "Well, what is it that you want to do?" And I was like, "Maybe I want to freelance for other people." He was like, "Well, what is it about production that you love?" I'm asking all these questions. And he's like, "I mean, it sounds like you want to be a producer, and you want to be a director. Like, it sounds like you want your own production company. It doesn't sound like you want to be an editor for someone else, a videographer for someone else. You want to be helping ideate, storytell, working directly with the client, conducting interviews," which is all the stuff that I love. And he was like, "It seems like you could just do that." And I was like, "What? I'm 27 years old. No, I can't. Like, I felt so underqualified. And then I reached out to another guy who his office was next to my yoga studio. I'd walked by it a bunch of times. So I was like, "Wow, that's an opening line on my LinkedIn message. Hey, I've walked by your office a few times. Would you ever be down to get coffee?" Got coffee with him. Same response. "Sounds like you're ready to start your own production company." He was a huge inspiration as well, because he was the one who said to me, he's like, "If there's something that you don't know how to do, you can always just hire someone who does." He was like, "When I started, like, somebody reached out to me and asked for an animated explainer video." He's like, "I'm not an animator." And I said, "Yes, I can do that for you." He goes, "And then I went and hired an animator." And he was like, "And I worked with the client and I helped come up with the content and I outsourced the animation." And I was like, "Oh, right. Obviously that's how that's done." But it needed to be pointed out to me, right? Like, obviously not everyone does everything. And of course, there's people that you can hire for things. I have a shoot coming up just this week, and I was just on the phone this morning with my director of photography because it's for broadcast, and he's done broadcast before. And I was like, "I want you on set. I don't want to be the one running the cameras because I'm used to doing web content. I want to make sure it is broadcast quality." So I hired someone who has done it before for my first time doing a broadcast quality project. And so it's that like limiting belief of I can't do it all. Also, those conversations were really helpful to kind of push me. And I was like, "Okay, I guess I'm doing it."
So it took the conversation with those two people getting the same feedback for you to make that leap. How did that feel once you came to that realization?
It felt crazy. It felt crazy. Like, that interview that I was telling you about, I left the interview and I called my mom and she was like, "How did it go?" And I was like, "I think I'm going to quit my job and start my own production company." She's like, "Okay." I mean, I told her what had happened, but like that was my output of the interview. Spoiler alert, I didn't get that job anyways, but I was probably looking back on it halfway through the conversation. I was like, I don't know if that I want this job.
You're probably sending out those vibes accidentally.
Oh, for sure. Looking back on it, I was like, of course that was like, I literally was like, okay, like they were like, "What do you want to do next here?" And I was, or "What do you ready to see yourself in 5 years?" And at one point in the interview, I was like, "Well, I mean, I want to keep working to save enough money to start my own company." Like, I'm pretty sure I said that to one of the interviewees, and I was like, that's probably not the best answer, but it was just, I was going through it. And I'm so glad that I did. It was a necessary step for me. But yeah, it felt wild. And going and telling, it was a really exciting, really, really exciting. Because I felt like I could create something and build something. And it felt possible, which was cool. Once I'd kind of gotten that reassurance, because it didn't feel possible before I had those conversations. But yeah, going and telling my, our director of communications, like, "Hey, I'm leaving." And she's like, "Where are you going?" And I was like, "Nowhere."
Nowhere.
I was like, "I don't have another job. I'm just going to do it. That's what's happening."
That is so exciting. I think every entrepreneur who has it in their heart, and that's part of just whether it's a recognized dream or it's that subconscious dream, dreams of that moment.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It really did feel wild though. It felt totally wild. I gave a ton of notice at my job. I gave like 6 weeks notice because I could. And I wanted to be able to start looking for clients and start, like, I had my like Paige Burns _media Instagram account, right? That like I would post some of my video work on, but I was not really freelancing very often. I did like a handful of weddings. That was it. I really wasn't like doing the business before starting the business, but I wanted to start kind of putting it out there that was going to be a thing. And my boss followed me on that Instagram account. So I was like, I got to start just like, planting these seeds, and people need to know, like, so I'm not being sneaky about it. And I wanted to wrap up the productions I was working on at the time. So I was like, I'll wrap these up. Don't give me anything new. Give me 6 weeks. We had like a big event coming up. I was like, I know you need coverage for that. Like, I will stay through that event and then we're done. And it did. It was really great because it did put me in a position to start talking to people internally and saying like, hey, this is a thing I'm doing. And so one of the graduate schools was one of my first clients. Like, they were like, oh, we actually were going to look for someone in like 2 months.
Oh, that's so great.
Yeah. So I was able to kind of start building those relationships. Actually, one of the women who was on the board for a nonprofit, she also was one of my first clients. And she worked in my office. And she was like, actually, the nonprofit I'm on needs a video. And so, yeah, that was a really helpful thing. And I'm so glad that I did it and had a supportive work environment, fortunately, who was all excited for me to do this. And, you know, was happy. I was happy to support when I kind of ripped that Band-Aid off and was like, I'm out of here.
That's so great. I've heard from people, I think that those feelings around making that choice and making that move can, you know, vary between person to person. So I'm hearing lots of excitement from you. I've heard from other people like, oh my gosh, I was so scared. I wasn't sure if it was the right decision. So it's so nice to hear that, you know, someone that you felt just so excited. I mean, I think that comes with owning your own business. You have to be excited about it, right? So the fact that came early was really awesome.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think too, in the theme of failure, like I really did set myself up for success, where I thought about it for a long time. I'd been planning it for a while. And I thought of every possible thing that could go wrong. Like, I was like, all right, well, say I don't get any clients, right? I had a savings, right? I had savings I could fall back on. I made sure I saved enough that I could. I mean, I was 27. I was living with roommates. My rent was like $850 a month, which I recognize is unheard of today.
In the Boston area, for sure.
Yeah, I was in Davis Square in Somerville. Like that apartment is now probably like 3 times as much. It's unreal. But I was like, can I make $850 a month to pay my rent, right? And if not, do I have it saved? Okay, cool. How long will that last me? If that fails, then what? Okay, well, I live right in Davis Square. There's plenty of restaurants around. I can always go back to the restaurant industry. I'd worked in the restaurant industry for years when I was in college in my early 20s. Could always try to find a serving job if I needed to. I can always edit for other people. And then I was like, worst case scenario. I grew up locally. I can go live in my mother's basement if I have to. And that was never something I wanted to do. But it was like, I will not be homeless. I will be fed. I don't have dependents. It was me and my dog. And I was like, what is the worst thing that's going to happen? Right? And so I really walked myself through all of that and was like, I guess I can do this.
I love that. You and I are very similar. I am a huge planner. I think of every scenario possible too. So I love that, because some people aren't like that. Some people wake up one day and say, I'm done with this full-time job. I'm quitting today. No plan, no thought about failure.
Yeah, I definitely couldn't do that. That's not in my DNA. But I am a big believer in like hope for the best, plan for the worst. And so I had a plan for the absolute worst. For if I burn through all my savings and I make zero money and I get no clients, I can go live in my mother's basement if I have to. She will take me begrudgingly as an adult back into her basement and being like, why? But she will.
But luckily, it does not sound like you had to go and live in your mother's basement.
No, I definitely didn't. And never got to that point. I was never struggling to pay any bills. Never an issue. Did I spend some of my savings? Absolutely. I had to make investments into the business. But there was always money coming in, even if it was just a little bit. So it wasn't. I think that push, I tell a lot of people that when they ask, like, you know, about starting and their fear of it, I'm like, for me, I had to fully rip off the Band-Aid. If I was starting the business while I still had my full-time job, I wouldn't have done the business. Like, it was so many pieces of starting a business is so outside my former comfort zone. Like, get it? Like, honestly, you and I had a networking coffee. Doing that, even 5 years ago, I would have been like cringing. I mean, I was so nervous when I reached out to those 2 guys and asked for coffee meetings. Like, it was so far out of it. And I felt wild for doing it. It felt crazy to me that I just reached out to someone I didn't know, right? Attending different networking events, pitching myself to people, putting myself out there, putting my face on social media. I mean, that's a whole other thing. But there was so many layers of this that was outside of my comfort zone. But I think for me and the way that I operate under pressure is I needed the pressure of, you have to do these things or you will not make rent. Like that was really it. Like you have to survive.
Right. No, that makes total sense. And it, a lot of, I think people are so different. And I just love hearing all of these stories because, again, for like somebody else, maybe they need it, they would need to kind of ease into it and dabble. So I love the rip the Band-Aid thing. It's great.
Yeah, it's good for me, not for everyone, for sure.
So as your business has grown over the years, and I know you've talked about some of the things like sales that were a little bit challenging. I know you just mentioned visibility. As time has gone on over these 5 years of building your business, have you noticed new challenges or new failures pop up along the way?
Of course. You're always growing, right? I think one of the things that has been the most challenging for me over the years is finding a balance between the solopreneur / production company, working with other people, hiring other people. When am I working with contractors? When is someone on payroll? Figuring all of that out, it is definitely that there's so much friction there and just like discomfort with like, how do I have to now deal with taxes. I have to deal with paying people. I have to find the right people. And I think through that, some of my biggest failures that I'm very grateful for have been in management and hiring. It's not something that is taught too often, right? It's kind of a lot of the times you just have to learn it. So over the years, I've had 3 different part-time employees that were on payroll. 2 of them were interns. And then after the 2 interns, they were each with me for 8 months until one of them, she was like, I'm getting another internship. I'm back in school. I want to still freelance with you. So she kept freelancing, but she wanted to free up her time to build on her experience. The other one graduated and got a full-time job. But they were each with me for 8 months, and there was really valuable learning experience with both of them. And then I hired someone who was a new grad after that, and she was with me for a shorter period of time because it just wasn't the right fit. And so going through those experiences of who I was hiring, how I was vetting people, how I was managing them, especially when they're college students, so their work experience is limited. How am I managing them? What creative freedoms am I giving them, and what guidelines am I giving them? Something that it took me working with 3 different people to kind of realize, like, I think I was almost giving all of them too much creative freedom. And I hate saying that because all creatives want is creative freedom. And so I would do things like, take this, here's the goal, run with it. I want to see what you do. So for the most part, they were doing, editing of like social media content, some video editing. Sometimes it would just be going through long interviews we have for videos and pulling the good sound bites for me so then I could go in and edit or someone else could. But occasionally it would be something like, hey, I want you to create, an Instagram reel for my brand using this, run with it, right? A lot of times I was like, just be creative. I want you to do what you want to do what inspires you. And I realized after a lot of time that the reason that wasn't working out was that I wasn't giving them guidance. I wasn't guiding them. And it almost feels like I've had this conversation with a few people. It almost feels like a millennial overcorrection where like, and this is broad strokes, right? But like a lot of millennials had managers who micromanaged. I've been in that situation myself in a handful of jobs where I've had someone very micromanaging over me and someone's, really, or not even over myself, over my colleagues, or I've had friends where I hear these things where it's like, oh my God, can you just let me do my job?
Right. And
I
you don't want to be
you.
like that.
And I don't want to be like that. And so I went too hard in the other direction, right? And I've heard the argument that, the generation of the micromanager, the problem with them was that like their bosses like didn't give them enough. And it just becomes these like layers. And I don't know what validity there is in these theories, but I know I overcorrected in the other direction and gave way too much freedom. And I did finally have a conversation with that first intern of mine who later continued to freelance with me, where she was like, yeah, no, I prefer when you kind of give me more detailed outline. And she performed better, of course, when I gave her a more detailed outline. I'm just thinking about myself, what I would have wanted. I wanted less hand-holding and more autonomy all the time. No matter how autonomous I was, I wanted more autonomy,
Right.
which is why I work for myself.
Yeah, the mark of an entrepreneur for sure.
Right.
Oh, but I think that's such a good point of view and a good thing to point out to people. Like, from the management side of things, as somebody who maybe didn't do it before, learning to adjust, learning to be self-aware enough to see what's working and what's not, and adjust from there. And it's something that as entrepreneurs we have to do in so many different areas, not just management. So it's a great skill to have, to recognize when maybe something you're doing isn't working and figure out why it's not working and then do something different.
Yeah, it's an interesting learning curve when it's really those like soft skills, where it took me a long time to realize, like, okay, I know that, you know, these women that I'm hiring are talented, and I know that they're creative, and I've seen them do great things. So like, what is the sticking point here? What am I not communicating? Because obviously I feel like I'm communicating super well, right? Because I understand me. And, you know, having to kind of like check myself, like, okay, what is it that I'm missing here? What is it that I'm not doing right? And I also think that, you know, with the third hire that I made, the most recent one, Lord help me if she listens to this, but I don't think she will. When I hired her, I think I'd picked up on a lot of these things, but not fully. So I do take responsibility as well for it not being the right fit. But I also think I got maybe a little bit jaded, or a little bit lazy in the hiring process. Because the first two that I hired, I, you know, did the resume, cover letter, send me samples of your work. When I got to the final round, I had interviewed people, and I think this is a big thing to notice. I had interviewed all these people, and the first time I hired, there was 3 finalists. And I was like, I like them all. I wasn't expecting to like them all. I thought Haley was going to be my favorite. Shout out Haley. She's the one that continued to freelance with me. I thought Haley was going to be my favorite, but I like them all. And so I gave them an assignment. I was like, create a social media post. I think I had them create like 3 social media posts. Do whatever you want in whatever format you want. The person who reached out to me and was like, could you send me some video assets to use? What do you want these to look like? And then delivered the fastest was Haley. And then I was like, okay, there's evidence. And her work was the best. But it wasn't even just that her work was the best. It was that she asked follow-up questions. She didn't just blindly take an assignment. She asked for resources, and she created something amazing. So I was like, okay, that was great. Second time I hired, same thing. I was down to 2. I had 2 people that I really liked. I was really torn. I gave them the assignment. And the one who blew me away, who I was not expecting, I really wasn't sure, is the one I hired. Third time I hired, I skipped the assignment. I don't know what was, and then I'm like, of course,
No.
And what's crazy is it ended up being, so I don't know what was happening to me, but that's a huge failure. Like, I didn't even learn from my own processes. I was like, oh, well, like, I'm hiring someone who's out of college now. Like, I don't need to, like, you know, there's a portfolio. I don't need them to prove themselves to me. But the problems I had with this employee was that she was not very timely, and she had poor communication skills. And those 2 things were proven previously in the assignment.
Oh, no.
And so it's like meeting deadlines and communicating were so crucial. And I'm like, it's like hindsight's, of course, 2020. But I think I didn't realize that assignment piece was working as much as it was until I skipped it because I was eager to make a hire.
Oh.
I really just wanted to like get someone in the role.
Right.
And she was very, very technically talented and a very nice person. But I didn't know at all about, and I wasn't able to expect the communication issues and the time management issues.
Right. No, that's so interesting that you had sort of almost gotten it right the first time and
I know.
went away from it not realizing maybe what parts were working. Oh, that's so funny. I feel like so many people would do the opposite and get it wrong the first few times.
And I think it was just like an impatience or like not appreciating, what I had done before. And I do think too, like when I had worked with those first 2 interns, there was things about like the way they worked and the way we worked together that I was like, oh, like she's just not great at this, or this isn't great at that, or whatever. Right? I'm kind of feeling these gaps. And then I was trying to learn from that. I was like, well, they're both very talented people and they're both hard workers. So like, what's missing here? And so I was doing a lot of reflecting on like my communication skills and like how I was managing. I wasn't even thinking about the hiring process. Like, how did I get them to like here and I just need to carry them here? Whereas I didn't realize that whole hiring process got me someone who started here. I'm sorry, I'm doing a visual thing. This is an audio medium. I'm
okay.
moving my hands around between, the end and the middle.
I I use my hands all the time. I hear you.
But getting someone who's starting at like 60% of the way there, right? For what I'm looking for. When you're hiring someone who's a college student, that's a really great starting point, right?
Oh, yeah.
It was actually my hiring process that was getting me there, and I didn't realize that. I was just so focused on my management skills and my communication and what is lacking here. So it's layers and layers of things, and I think that currently I don't have anyone on payroll like part-time in that position. I've restructured where now I'm really just working with a lot of consistent, more advanced contractors. So it's on a project by project basis. But I still am working on those communication skills, the regular check-ins, that regular, here's what we're working on, making sure I'm giving every detail that I can, and trusting these more advanced professionals in their creative skills while also making sure that I'm communicating. It's like, be creative and run with it, but here's what I really need to definitely happen, and making sure that that's clear. It's like a no-brainer, but something I was forgetting to do.
Oh, and it's such a balance too. And every business will be a little different, right? In the level of direction that somebody needs, depending on what the task is and the topic is that they perform, for clients. And so it's a learning. It's not like you could say, hey, I did this other job before and I'm taking the exact approach I used into my own business. You have to learn with it. So that's great that you learned along the way.
Absolutely. And I think every person that you manage is going to be a different experience too. At my previous job, I had a student worker who worked for me about like 15 hours a week, maybe 20. And there was 2 different student workers over the time that I was at Simmons. The first one I hardly needed to manage. Like she basically taught me how to do my job. But when I started, I was like, what did your former boss do? What am I supposed to do here? Because nobody knows anything about video except for you now. Like he's a college sophomore. And we have like a really great relationship now, her and I, which is awesome. Because I was her boss, but I was only 4 years older than her when we started. So, but she didn't really, I was managing her, but she didn't really need much of my management. She respected my feedback. And I think that was like, I was like, oh, as long as I'm giving clear feedback, then we're good. But she didn't need that initial management. And then when she graduated and we hired a new student worker to replace her, I realized like, okay, so the way I work with you is not the same way I worked with Caitlin. This has to change a little bit as well. But there was also, it wasn't just me. There was there was the whole marketing department. There was a structure. And so I struggled to manage her a little bit. But even in that, I was like, okay, this isn't so bad. I can do this. And then you move on and you're managing more and more people. And it's like, well, the way that everyone works is different, and really having to adapt to that as well, or making sure that you're hiring people that work similarly to the way that you work that's a puzzle I've yet to unlock perfectly. So that's something that I definitely have like failed on and I'm still tinkering with for sure.
Yeah, some of those things take doing it multiple times to really figure it out. And I think, we wear so many hats when we own our own businesses that you're not going to be perfect at every aspect of the business the first time you do it. It just would be impossible.
Absolutely.
Yes. All right. Awesome. This has been so great. I have one last question for you. If you had to give a piece of advice to somebody just starting out in their own business, whether it was a video production business or something else, what would you say to give them inspiration that they can get past their failures? What's your biggest tip that you would have for them?
It's a good question.
Put you on the spot.
I know. It's tough because I think, I think I've said a lot of things that I normally would give as advice, but also that like one tip is so tough because I think that everyone does operate a little bit differently. I think the biggest thing that is kind of industry agnostic and person agnostic is like to not have a scarcity mindset and to have that abundance mindset. I think that I started this business and there was a lot of mindset work that had to happen. And I think sometimes there's friction against that. Maybe if you come from a corporate job, you're like, what is this mindset work? Like, what am I doing? This is so strange. But I think like shifting your mindset and really taking control of that mindset of like, what are like your thoughts are impacting your actions fully. And so are you thinking, I'm never going to get another job, or I'm not going to make that next sale? I mean, even when I talked about before, like leaning all in on one lead I needed that constant kind of reminder of there's so many businesses out there and they could all benefit from what I had to offer. They could all benefit from video. Are they all going to buy it? No. Can they all afford it? No. Can a lot of them, and will a lot of them? And no matter how many video people there are in this city, there's more businesses and more videos that need to be made, and we can all work together. Like, I work with other producers all the time. Like, we collaborated on each other's shoots. Like, it's not a competition. I think that's big too. It's to not think about everything as a competition, as that job is out there. And dear God, I hope I'm the one that gets it. It's like, if you're the right fit for them and they're the right fit for you, it'll happen. And if not, then like they'll work with someone else, and like root for them. Like, hope that they will do a great job for that business and like for their business. And like, there's other opportunity out there. So I really think that, yeah, that scarcity versus abundance mindset is such a huge thing to tackle, I think, when you first get started, at least for me, because my biggest fear was, like, I'm not going to make any money. And that, we all need money. As much as we don't want to like focus on the money, most of us need money. You know, most of us don't have the trust fund to live off of or anything. Most of us need to actually be making a living. So that definitely, I would say, is a big thing to focus on.
That's great. Well, thank you so much for sharing all of that. It was so great to hear about some of the things that were failures or challenges in your business and how you overcame them, and your tips for everybody else. I can't wait for everybody to hear this episode.
Well, thank you so much. I so appreciate it. This was fun.
No problem. Thank you. All right. Have a great day.
You too.